All right. Welcome to a new episode of Linh Talks Tech. Today, again, with David Stavisski from IT Conductor. Just two guys playing around. But this episode is called Beyond Uptime, Achieving True Operational Awareness in the SAP BTP Integration Suite, particularly with IT Conductor. So we did an episode recently relating to kind of BTP and the whole gap in monitoring and availability as well as just operational awareness. So most SAP team thinks that, they're monitoring their landscape, right? Until something breaks. And in fact, interestingly enough, this morning I had a call with a customer that they want to understand what their availability monitoring options are because something looks available like their S4, they don't know exactly what happens behind the scene that may disrupt some business process. So one of the things today we look at is the environment looks green when you're on a dashboard, but something like Business Critical Process Integration Suite that manages a lot of the customer integration for what they call iFlows or maybe APIs are not responding. BTP shows available. So this week we had an interesting post as well related to a real incident that happened earlier this week with SAP BTP. They were degraded in their service in terms of it looks green, like BTP is actually up in EMEA region, but behind the scene, a lot of the services that related to APIs and some configuration were not available. They were down for, I think, a couple of hours. So if you're relying on business process to be running for your company and they're kind of failing silently, where are some of the places to look at? Today, we're going to go into a little bit deep dive. And this time, we're going to look at IT Conductor, how we approach this gap to try and close the SAP BTP and Integration Suite, but not just looking at specifically integration, right? How does it kind of feed into the whole ecosystem? Because it's important to look at the complete picture from back end to the connectors to the integration suite, and then maybe even the endpoints. So we could talk about some of that, how important it is. So what do you think today in terms of like the hidden traps over the last week? I've seen a couple customers, BTP environment, especially in BTP Integration Suite. Again, they look like it's up, right? Because, you're looking at only one perspective. But is the service, individual service, is it available? Not unless you're monitoring those service as an endpoint, as a part of a critical flow. So what about it's up, like degraded performance this earlier in the week, right? We talk about it's up, but maybe it's degraded. Maybe iFlow volume drops or throughput drops because of degradation in service. And those things will end up like in the back end system as kind of taking longer to process. So these are potential areas we think that's important because honestly, BTP is distributed, right? So it's kind of sitting on SAP Cloud, on Cloud Foundry. It's kind of distributed, and the service itself is based on instances you run. You crank up whatever BTP app you run as a service, but it's dependent on a lot of layers. You're depending on the foundation on Foundry, but all the services, APIs, connectivity, and health, and all that stuff as well. So, but once you deploy the iFlow, it's running. It's supposed to be responding to messages and processing them, forwarding from source to target and tracking their completion status. Like if it goes in error, maybe it's hanging. These are areas we need to start looking at so that message backlogs, volumes, just the overall tracking when everything's fine, but do you know how many messages are being processed at a given point in time? And if, let's say, you wanted to know maybe even it spike or drops, right? So all partial service issues. So like we say, BTP could be available, but partially, maybe some APIs are failing. And whether you look, if you're not actually monitoring those APIs and connectivity degradation and things like that. So this is where I think most of the issue today is that not that the native monitoring is not available. We know SAP has the integration suite, the cockpit, BTP cockpit. They have also the cloud AOM that has integration suite or integration monitoring. And then, of course, you have the back end. If you host it on like RISE, you have your core inside SAP monitor. But how does that help if you have to go to 3 or 4 different places when there's an error? and how does that help you to diagnose the root cause and things like that. So I think just because it's available and the technical stacks are monitored doesn't mean that it's operationally kind of something that you're looking at that sees the reality end to end. So that's what I think I mean by operational awareness, right? So David, you have any insights to this we can talk about before we get into some level of what ITC is doing?
Yeah, I think the future of this is not really monitoring per se, because SaaS app is always available, and BTP being a SaaS app, the iFlows themselves become the point of failure, not a single. There's multiple point of failure.
Mm-hmm.
And the next step would be, what if it fails? What do? You will hear an answer that you incorporate that logic in the iFlow itself, right, in the process. But sometimes it's not possible because off the shelf. Sometimes it takes too long to fix it and stuff. So next step, which we're not talking about right now, but maybe for the future, is automation,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So in essence, it's a visibility into the business process itself. Not different, much different from what we do with SAP jobs today, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So if it fails, you restart it, right? Restart from same step and stuff like this. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe you
Mm-hmm.
need to restart a step, maybe that. So that's, I think, the kind of future.
There's the operational recovery, right? How do you recover
Yeah.
from situations? Yeah, and I think that's also important. I know that SAP knows it's important because they trying to build these operation hooks automation that perhaps Cloud AM can call out to external hooks to do something, right? But again, if it's not fully integrated, you're just calling some hook, you don't see inside of what that thing does or track its success. You might just basically hand off to something else, and that's another thing we can get into later on if we talk about automation. But so let's imagine this, right? So the system's up, back end system's up, BTP's up. The question is it usable? Like if you have massive amount of message failures, right? Where do you get notified and what visibility do you have into your, not the messaging iFlows only, but like the BTP infrastructure, maybe, different areas about services, the actual certificates, or even resources. If your resource consumption goes beyond whatever that you provision, or create the instance for. Maybe you have.
Or budgeted for.
Yeah, so the whole that's a FinOps exercise too, right? So BTP, the cost is not a static thing. We know that, right? It's both service level and also from a consumption level. So it's important to track what does it mean if I'm processing, I don't know, 1,000 messages an hour. Is the payload important as well? Some messages are not the same. Some messages are larger. If you're processing, thousands of orders, some payloads may be different. Maybe an order has a 100-line item versus a 2-line. So in the long run, I think that's also become important. It's like performance and also kind of FinOps stuff. And also because in BTP, you talk about like structurally they create global accounts and then they have sub accounts and then instances and services, etc. That whole like health monitoring is hierarchical. It's not static. It's not like a flat layer, right? It's hierarchical. Maybe David, you can talk about how we approach like hierarchical monitoring in terms of IT Conductor relationship between these entities, right? And that may be a good leeway into seeing what we do today because I think it's a foundation thing. BTP is a service on top of a cloud, and you can call it global accounts, sub accounts, and services. They're very particular about specific for that environment. Every customer is going to be different. They have prod and non-prod BTP sub accounts, and then they also maybe have regional and tenant specific services they run. So the idea of being able to hierarchically track all of these, it's an interesting thing because you only think about it when there's some failures. Like for instance, if BTP has degradation, does it have fail for service? So right now, it's not that straightforward. BTP structurally doesn't fail like over two different regions like you typically have with your back end. If you're like running S4 and it fails, you might go over to DR. BTP is a little bit more complicated on that side of the fence as well. So it's interesting because you need to understand what's behind the scene, not only what's in front. Like the iFlows are the front stuff, right? The stuff that flows, but behind the scene to know the relationship is important as well. So let's get into it. I think we can go into what IT Conductor has. This is obviously our first feature that we're coming out because of customer asking us. to provide some visibility into BTP and Integration Suite. By far, it's an evolving thing because, again, there's thousands of different types of business integration scenario the customer could have. I saw a diagram this week from one of our customers. Interesting. The integration diagram is like, whoa, there's like a whole forest of what Integration Suite plugs into. Some people still refer to the old term CPI, right? But Integration Suite is basically CPI, the new generation of it. But yeah, I mean, they've been on board for maybe several years now, but they still don't have a firm grasp of when things go wrong, where to go look at, because it's like literally, hundreds of endpoints and flows. So let's go take a look. You want to share your screen, David?
Sure. Okay. One of the important parts of managing your application infrastructure is having one place to go. Because otherwise, you end up with maybe very sophisticated tools, but they're point tools. So you have to switch a bunch of screens and go there, dig there, dig there. In the end, it becomes unusable because there's no single pane of glass. I know it's a overused term, but it still holds true. So the way IT Conductor works, I mean, everything is a so-called app, right? And then we organize them into sites based on location or logical grouping, and then into groups of application running on this application, quote unquote, running on this site, and so on. So we cover a breadth of SAP ecosystem and beyond. Really, SAP is just one use case, but we cover pretty much everything. And you can see that's our lab, how much stuff we have.
Mm-hmm.
So for us, it's completely agnostic. Is it on-prem app? Is it in the cloud, running on the cloud infrastructure? Is it a SaaS? As long as it has a way to get to it via some protocol, we can get to it and monitor it and automate it if it's instrumented to be automated, of course. So here you can see, among other things, again, this is more of an administrative view, right? So it doesn't reflect the relationships. It just reflects the infrastructure that is at place. What we also have capability of building a service tree. So you pretty much dynamically or manually assemble the service tree. We can do it dynamically based on the dependencies, but that's important to differentiate. And that's usually catered to more business operations where they see the impacts and stuff like this. So, but it overlays this. In IT Conductor, everything is an object, and we just represent different relationship in different ways. So let's dig into Integration Suite. So here's currently we only rolled out Integration Suite. I will plan to cover other BTP services like the sub-account management and whatever comes next, or whatever they ask for, customers ask for, we will roll it out because for us it's a kind of incremental effort. It's not that complicated.
Right.
Okay. So here's it, Integration Suite. We named it Integration Suite. You can rename it, of course, if it's you have several, like quality assurance and production and stuff like this.
Mm-hmm.
But typically, a customer has one. It's sub-account based, but in most cases, probably have one major. So yeah, let me zoom in. I don't want to wait until it opens up all the tree. So here's the whole tree, how we look at it. So we cover pretty much everything we can get our hands on. And the important difference, if you look at something like Cloud LAM, they do show stuff and they do allow you to subscribe for errors, but we really bottom up monitoring infrastructure, right? So any metric you can see, you can monitor it. You can set a threshold and get alerted, and all the resource usage stuff is monitored. You see, every time you see that kind of leaf with the histogram there, that means it's a monitor. It needs to be set up. If it's gray, it means there is no threshold. So it's collected but not monitored. If it's there's not much to see here, we're not doing much with that stuff. We're just collecting the static data really for now. But if it's green or yellow, that means it's been monitored, and you can see it's above the threshold and stuff like this.
This is actually important in what I call behavioral monitoring. So you're not looking for any specific threshold alerts, but you're looking for behavior. Like instead of a binary up, down, or red, yellow, you are looking for resource utilization patterns or throughputs, anomalies like file sizes and things like resource saturation, because all the instances on BTP, they have obviously behind the scenes spun up on some virtual infrastructure, right? So there is definitely bottlenecks on volume and throughput and files, especially if you're doing a lot of files, content size files. Those behavioral thing is actually very important, especially when you are, I'd say, when customer go live, they have no idea. It's very hard to do load tests to understand performance KPI for integration because you don't know the volume, right? So it's actually very important to actually get out of the box and get those type of metrics and show these behaviors, and then learn over time what is normal and what's not normal, and what to size for. And I think that's the consumption side of resource usage as well.
And moreover, today we looking at it still as input for humans, but it becomes the input for Gen AI. So our agents actually able to analyze all those. And when you set a threshold, it's a hint, right?
Mhm,
It's not
mhm.
necessarily detects a problem. It's a hint of what water levels you comfortable with. And then when you use health checks, automated health check with AI agent and root cause analysis with AI agents, they're able to take these hints, understand the history, and then come to a conclusion, right? Based on
Right.
prior whatever information documented by someone, right? How to troubleshoot and stuff like this. So that's why it's important to look at it not just when we use it today for humans, but also for AI agentic consumption, where it synthesizes something new from it. Anyway, so that's just one example. Another one is, for example, key stores and key monitoring. We don't have any PGP keys, so
Mhm,
it didn't roll out because it needs keys, actual keys to start showing them. But the concept is the same. You have to monitor it, right? Not just see it. Because if you see it, that's fine. It helps.
mhm,
But if you have ability to monitor it, like we do, we actually calculated days to expiration, and you can set a threshold and understand, what's happening, get alerted, or feed it into AI agent that does it periodically, health check, and say, here's your certificates, they're gonna expire soon and stuff like this. Definition of soon is also, a
mhm,
hint
mhm.
that you give it. So that's for kind of static data monitoring. Now, the interesting part is integration flows, iFlows, right?
Yeah.
This is where this action happens. And we kind of dig into it as well. So there's different ways to look at it in IT Conductor. You can just look at the individual ones and say, okay, show me what's the structure of it.
Mhm.
These are simple ones, but the more complicated ones have lots of steps. So we also have a dashboard set up for this. So let's see. This is a dashboard for message processing.
Okay.
So it pretty much gives you total iFlows. We don't have many to show. You just saw it, right? So this
Yeah, yeah.
failed, compressed, and stuff like this. Failed messages. So you can also see those specifically failed. Below, you can see the errors generated. So all of these are also monitored directly here,
Mhm.
where you can notify an alert. If some of them errored out, you can send notification with information about the message failure and why it happened and so on.
So this is it's kind of like monitoring the payload in terms of volume and number of status messages.
Yeah, for now we just this is just configured to do the errors,
Mhm.
but because we agnostic and we can this is all flexible in IT Conductor, you can add the number of messages and the number of specific messages and the duration of the and so on. Because if you start digging into it, again, you have the capability of here it is. That's kind of hierarchical. We're not spending time on graphically depicting the flow.
Mhm. Mhm.
We
Yeah,
actually have capability.
that's just a visual, so-called kind of related to like pretty dashboards. You get a functional, I think hierarchical for us, and you get a lot more detailed information without having to drill into individual parts. So I think that's the way we've
Yeah,
done.
no, it didn't
So
work.
I'd say from like say for instance, if ECC is having processing delay because of its integrated iFlow coming from integration suite, right? technically speaking, you can do that type of thing because, start time, end time, whatever message status, you can actually see it's delayed. Or if we were tracking, like we're expecting messages certain time and it's not arrived yet or whatever, that is also delay, right? So delay doesn't mean just because it's long running. It could be not hasn't even arrived. Maybe certain messages we know happen every time during the part of the day. If we don't see it, we have capability to kind of do the stuff.
Yeah, this becomes more complicated because it's, as we call it, negative monitoring, right?
Yeah.
Monitor the absence of something. I mean, we pretty adept at it, especially based on our file watching
Hmm.
functionality. It's very similar, right? So you actually not just dealing with the process only. You're also dealing with data stores entry, right? So you would have the entries or the data store, and you would monitor their presence or absence because these are the usually need kind of integration payload, or at least the objects that they store, files in essence, right? Where the data stored and then it's shipped there or there, or pulled or pushed. So, I mean, really it becomes more of a business process
Hmm.
or integration process monitoring. And here the flexibility is the key. If you don't have the flexibility and you
Yeah.
hard coded all your stuff, I'm cloud LLM, wink, wink.
Yeah. So I see the problem right now, like message failure, I see already, and even with Cloud AM, right? They dig into the message, but they lose the context of what I call kind of a root cause domain type. So for instance, if you're doing silo-based troubleshooting, you're digging into a message, but you don't get the context, meaning that what if it's related to storage? What if it's related to an API endpoint? Or what is related to a backend availability? So with what we're doing here is we're creating this dependency through a very complicated environment. So you have backend, then you got integration, then you have endpoints, you got resources. So all of these are important because any of this could cause the problem that the error message in the iFlow happen. But if you just start from the iFlow and not really seeing the overall picture, then you're missing that context for identifying root cause. And remember, we all want to get faster root cause, and basically what AI can do is do kind of agentic level, co-pilot root cause analysis, right? And the more data it has access to in terms of being able to have structurally what we call health status across the end-to-end monitoring, then it can derive and say, likely because of correlation, this error message you're getting from iFlow is due to, let's just say, some file that is failing or running out of resources, or maybe a connection timeout through one of the connections. So this is important for the context of RCA that I think is
Yeah,
beyond.
all the dependencies and correlation is, I mean,
Hmm. Hmm.
we're not showing right now correlation. We don't have much payload to correlate the stuff
Hmm.
to. But in IT Conductor, everything can be related with the
Hmm.
discovery rule.
Hmm.
Whatever values are similar or dissimilar, we can match them and then relate one to another. Again, this is a work in progress, so we building out, understanding how customers are using it,
Hmm.
but it's all
Yeah, yeah,
baked
yeah.
into the same infrastructure architecture of IT conductors.
So I'm trying to relate this to, let's say, for instance, like in the beginning, we talked about the BTP incident this early this week. This is a real world scenario. So, for instance, if we are not able to talk to the API endpoint of Integration Suite because that service got degraded, right? We already tracked that today. So, like for our monitoring failure, is kind of, you think about it, coming from externally, checking the API endpoints because that's what we use to pull up this information. That would definitely show early warning that something's got wrong with the API endpoint, right? If we're not able to even connect to integration suite, not able to inquire about the telemetry or the availability of certain services.
Yeah, so you're talking about like pings, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we do it with our dedicated URL monitoring stuff, and we can relate it to, say, if you find some
Yes,
sort
I
of
said, yeah, exactly. API is not responding, or maybe it's just like erroring out with some issues. So that's also early indication that the um, the service is related to the integration suite, or any BTP app for that matter is having some kind of problem.
yeah, okay. Yeah, that's one of those. It's a journey. It's not one answer.
Yeah, could you go back to that dashboard we had? I think you have a resource usage dashboard. So let's spend a little time on here.
Yeah, I showed before the kind of hierarchical view where we monitor stuff, right? So it's
Uh-huh.
another view of it. It takes the same stuff and shows it as a dashboard in a single place.
And this
That's
is
kind
also report capable, right? So this dashboard here can be generated and reported on a regular basis. So sometimes maybe management want to see the throughput or resource utilization, etc. That could be for operational purposes automated as a regular report. I know, for instance, they call it business ready report. Like could be certain amount of data wants to be shown on a reporting basis for like beginning of day or something like that. So yeah, I think those are important to show ability to report. Not only have dashboards, because most people think dashboard is nice, but a lot of people don't log on and check, right? So you want that in your inboxes and email to let you know that services are okay. So maybe management would just say, yeah, I got a report that's showing me all my statuses of resource utilization and service levels are there. But yeah,
yeah.
I think this is something we use today for all of our customers, right? They want kind of business ready report or SLA reports on a frequent basis, sometimes even several times a day during shift, important times before they pick business use or something like that. But it's all integrated. So the IT Conductor essentially within reporting and delivery mechanism. And also you can even store some report for long-term analysis. So, let's say weekly reports, monthly reports, so that you can compare maybe resource assumption or something, consumption can be compared.
Yeah, I'm not sure why it's not generating properly. It's probably some.
Yeah, we maybe not data exposed yet for the reporting purposes. And that's,
Yeah, it's a range thing. Need to set it up properly. Understand? Yeah,
yeah.
we're not running a lot of data, unfortunately, for now.
Yeah. So I'm gonna switch to like maybe a little bit more into the message. So when message flows today and it fails, that's the first. If you're looking at from operation standpoint, you just want to get notified, right? So in this case, you can subscribe to a message status and say, I want. You can actually do by message, or you can do by frequency. So let's say if I have 5 messages for failing in 15-minute window, that may be indicating something. So we can do both by messages you can subscribe to, for instance, maybe some specific type of message, but you can also get the frequency. Frequency monitoring helps in determining there's some unusual. So it's not individual by mean like maybe normally, just like ABAP dumps, right? The frequency is important to tell you that underlying problem, even though each dump itself may be important if you know what context or content you're looking for. So in this case, for us, we just like what are some critical things to look at in terms of creating early notification for frequency-based monitoring. So that way you reduce the noise overall and you just give like the pattern-based monitor there. Because again, if SAP BTP is up and running, and everything's fine, and maybe underlying infrastructure is fine, but then maybe you have some endpoint issues, and suddenly you're getting, let's just assume you might have a certificate that just expired, either on Integration Suite or your backend SAP S4, or maybe even one of the targets that you are sending out to a business partner. Anything in the longer line could cause a problem, even though everything is structurally up, but it's not flowing error. And that way, you would definitely get a whole interval of the volume spike in number of failures, right? And because I think the messages do retry, and you may not even get failures, you may get long wait times. They're just sitting there waiting to process, but not going anywhere.
Yeah, in this case, you actually need to monitor a number of retries as well, because
Yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah, yeah.
normally indicative of underlying problem.
Yeah. And if everything's flowing, perhaps your network end-to-end connectivity is fine, looks fine. But if everything backs up and it retries, what happened, right? So you have a large volume. Let's say normally you're processing, I don't know, 10 messages per minute or something, and suddenly it's all backing up, and then you get a pile up to, hundreds. And then when they retry, the whole volume goes. So what happens is if you're not monitoring things like, I don't know, let's say connectivity network throughputs, which we do for things like the backend system. Some customer even want like their network to be monitored from a traffic and failure standpoint. Those type of things also important. So it's not, when we talk about integration, it's like important to understand it's whole end to end, right? The integration by itself, the word means that you are connecting some source to some target through a middleware, and integration suite is the middleware. Everything in between could be important for observability and kind of root cause analysis. So I think it's important to distinguish the internal SAP problems versus the external platform incidents that can cause your end-to-end scenario to fail on integration side. Oh yeah, so that's integrations. That's where you created the some of that.
Yeah,
So
we're at,
what else do you have that is interesting to show as well? I think pattern side, partial services, traditional monitoring, so I think it's kind of missed. But I think for partial degradation, it's important to say, kind of we call gray visibility failures, gray zones, where customers maybe just want to observe. It's not really a problem until they say, oh, this gray now actually should be a yellow or red because something is bottling up.
yeah, the gray typically says we collect, we don't monitor actively. So you
Okay.
can report, you can feed it to
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
agents, but it won't trigger alert on its own. So
Mm-hmm.
when you have a color for the leaf, it tells that it's been monitored. Green means it's okay, below threshold, whatever. And yellow and red, it's depending on the severity that you assign to the.
So even outside of BTP and Integration Suite, because we talk about service endpoints. I mean, IT Conductor, I think we touch a little bit on the probing capability, right? So we have ability to, let's just say, check a service endpoint. Maybe it's Ariba, maybe it's Concur, maybe it's whatever. They all have a service endpoint, both publicly and also kind of like an API endpoint. So all those are possible areas where we can cover if you think about a network coverage to ensure those endpoints are available and responding. That's some of our customers are doing that kind of endpoint monitoring through the probe.
Yep, and then you easily connect them, hook them up to the existing
Okay.
either endpoints here in BTP Integration Suite or processes and stuff dependencies. That's all just configuration.
Okay.
Add new one.
So I kind of want to say there's always some more to cover in depth, but what the big picture zoom out is that you want to be able to have a full range of coverage from back end to front end to middleware, infrastructure versus business process, and then build that into an overall picture where you're giving the entire, you're not just a BTP admin, you're not a basis admin, you're not an operation, you're not a business just looking at like FI documents or whatever, but you can have a global view and then you carve out specific views for different teams if needed. But the whole troubleshooting and integration is complicated because if everybody brings up their stuff in different tools, the problem is then how do you agree to correlate and say what is the probable root cause of the problem? So that's, I think it's important is to think about the whole end-to-end picture, right? It's not isolation, because isolation, we're talking again 3 or 4 or 5 tools, network guys, infrastructure guy, basis guys, BTP admin, and then integration suite guys who need to go into the cockpit stuff. And I think that reduction in the mean time to repair something doesn't happen when you are needing all of those from different people. So I think from our perspective, having an integrated approach, not just with SAP, but maybe third party. Remember, integration, there's a lot of third party system that SAP doesn't cover. If you're talking to SAP ecosystem, great. But if you're talking out to maybe your shipping logistics, your third party, you have no visibility into what the minimum you would need to do there is to cover the endpoint through the API or through probing. They'll make sure that's part of the coverage. I think in IT Conductor, we like to represent everything also as kind of a service tree. The reason is, of course, just think about it. If you're doing a maintenance, SAP saying, I am going to schedule your integration suite, quarterly maintenance where it's not going to be available, whatever. It's also to understand if you have a service hierarchy, what that's going to impact, what back end is going to impact. Maybe I should schedule also maintenance for my system during that time because you don't want error messages, the partners trying to send you information and something is down. But if you have that in the total map out dependency tree as a service in IT Conductor, then you can actually see, oh yeah, I should put all these schedule maintenance as well, because if I'm not getting any inputs from my integration layer, is the back end really useful, or should I also take that opportunity to schedule maintenance as well and maybe do some housekeeping there? So there's other operational thing, decision making you can do based on certainly knowing the integrated ecosystem. I mean, we do that today when customer want to do, I don't know, a system refresh. They need to know that they need to take down a bunch of different related systems, or even when you're doing patching, right? So when you do patching, you have to understand what are all the things that you patch on this box, and not only impact that box, but what are all the integrated things it talks to, because you need to also pause processing on the other servers. So that's one other thing I want to talk about, is really it's integrated. The word integration suite means it's integrated with many things. So don't look into silos of only one thing or another, because you miss out the observability context, but also you miss out on operational lifecycle management as well.
Yeah, you need another integration suite to integrate the integration suite, right?
So, yeah. So, one other thing I want to draw attention to is, if you are using Cloud AOM to monitor your integration suite, it all works great. But if SAP, like we had last week, actually the support portal was down, BTP was affected, it's all in that one basket. So really, it's you won't have access to anything, let alone. So Cloud AOM is a push technology. You're pushing from the managed system. So let's say your S4 is pushing data to Cloud AOM, and if Cloud AOM is on BTP, and if that is down, actually you lost the visibility into your S4, right, and also your endpoint. So maybe your third party. So there is something to be said about putting all your eggs in one basket. Per se, in terms of at least from a monitoring standpoint, it looks easy because this is all SAP ecosystem, so let's just go that route. But I think.
And it's not just that, it's also multiple points of failure, because in essence, you need to configure each SAP system to push the data, right?
Mm-hmm,
And you
mm-hmm,
have to maintain that. What if the
mm-hmm,
job fails or whatever?
mm-hmm.
Stop pushing. So there's no single central point where you can go and say, okay, fix that, change the IP address and blah, blah, blah. You have to log into multiple systems, configure the cloud connector and that. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure how you can operate
Yeah, yeah.
effectively in large environment. It becomes a nuisance.
So let me kind of summarize. I think we give you a little glimpse already, folks watching this, on what IT Conductor is doing in BTP Integration Suite. This is actually, by the way, it's extremely complicated to get all this data. So we've kind of done the groundwork, and we certainly invite customers to bring the use case that. But why is this important? And I want to summarize why we're doing all this, right? Just not doing it just for fun. But BTP Integration Suite is kind of here to stay. SAP is basically migrating all PO, PI, CPI, but etc. This is basically an integration suite. So the more workloads move to BTP, which it is happening, the integration suite becomes kind of mission critical. If it's not already, it is mission critical from business processes. So it's less about what you control, it's more about the APIs that drive the business process. So those APIs that push data and whatever is important. So the complexity increases because now you have more endpoints, more APIs, more integration scenario. So the monitoring itself have to evolve from very system centric to what we call kind of service aware or context driven from service end to end, which is kind of what I mentioned earlier. So that's a kind of a summary of why we think the service context monitoring is important, especially now, but also to enable agentic AI to be able to discover and traverse the service dependency to tell you where things there's problem, because we have the telemetry, but in order to process, let's say you have configure 100 different iFlows for different business partners. It's almost impossible for a human to go and study that and see where is the issue, bottlenecks affecting my supply chain or something. You need that from an AI standpoint to be able to have the service defined, monitor, provide telemetry data so that AI can look at it and say, hey, give me a health check of my complete integration scenario with all my business partners. So that's something I think is important why structurally you have to build on the platform that will enable that kind of work beyond just saying, is the system up, is BTP up or whatever. Right? It doesn't give you that intelligent layer anymore. And then beyond that, what are you going to do now? You want to be able to automate. So once we detect something, the automation becomes important. So we need to be able to say address a large volume of errors automatically. And there's some that are not addressable, then they flow to a human in the loop to kind of do that. So from IT Conductor standpoint, we kind of bring visibility into BTP and Integration Suite as a starting point, but really the end point of all this is to automate the RCA as much as possible for root cause analysis, and also respond to it via automation. And that bridging the gap between only observing to doing actions and providing intelligent kind of workflow and automation on top of that is kind of where our mission really is. So that's kind of the summary why we are tackling this integration suite as part of the enhancement of ability to help customers manage their business, because the customers are not going to just run S4 by itself. They're going to run a lot of things integrated into the ecosystem. All right. Thanks, David. Good work. I think we're going to wrap up this episode. We're going to see you next episode. Probably we're going to talk about AI a lot more. So stay tuned. We will have some real interesting things to talk about on AI side, what we've done in terms of IT Conductor, leveraging AI itself on our platform, but also creating use case that are very useful for customers, both on operations and the business side as well. So stay tuned for that. And again, see you on the next episode. Thank you.
Thank you.